Of course, the action in Canberra today was a little more hot air than usual. Why? The economic roundtable of hand-picked people by the government, majority of which agree with the government, dissenters not really even invited into the room because, of course, they already know what they're planning to do with a 3-day conversation about what they should do for the next 3 years.
It's been a very intensive period of consultation. A boardroom blitz with dozens of business leaders, union leaders, over 40 ministerial roundtables, 900 submissions from across the country, and discussions, I think, with everyone, or at least almost everyone, around the table. And I wanted to say that the appetite and the ambition has been really encouraging.
On 900 submissions. There are literally more people that are directly affected by the greyhound ban, which is 1,000 people, in Tasmania than the people that have actually put forward ideas, or at least the ones that have been accepted to be discussed and then whittled down into the ones they already want to get to. But I couldn't help but think of what I was watching today and many of the interviews about what has been happening today, that when you look at this economic roundtable, it reminds me a little bit like, you know how there are those songs all of our lives we've just sung along with, and then one day you actually realise what the words are and you go, oh, okay, that's weird. Or like some of the greatest songs of all time, like Bohemian Rhapsody. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, do you do the fandango? What the heck does that mean? No one knows, but it sounds like a song and we all sing along, especially at the right time, in between Daryl Braithwaite and John Farnham at a wedding. But a perfect example of the Scaramouche, Scaramouche, do you do the fandango, thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening, Galileo, okay, you get the point. The weirdness, when words are there, but it's all empty calories, it's all fairy floss talk. If you spoke like this to a normal human being, they just look at you and go, what? This is some of the Radio Gaga that they were doing today in Canberra.
Big economic challenges confront us, and our collective ambition needs to meet this moment.
We come in very optimistically. We're hoping to evolve and develop some good ideas over the next 3 days. We're hoping those ideas get on the table.
There's an appetite for ideas. And we all know here in this room that the job of reform is never done.
We need to make sure that that government-to-government collaboration, making sure that that business-to-business understanding is enhanced.
It's great to have this conversation, I think. Already it's a success given all the attention, all the ideas and the debate that it's spurred.
Magnifico. Honestly, I think I'm aware of what they're saying. But so often the people who become the people who end up in a room like this are people who are so well practiced at being able to sort of say everything and nothing at the same time. Now, despite the fact that the Treasurer said this about how important it was for all of those people who already agree with the government to be in the room to tell the government what they are already agreeing to do in the next 3 years.
Now, we have filled this room with your experience and your expertise. We have opened that door to you, and we are genuinely opening our minds to your ideas.
These people are so bright, so magnificent, that apparently they can't be trusted with mobile phones. Now, these people all know how to have them on silent. Maybe even they all know how to put them on aeroplane mode. But you were not allowed today, if you were one of the handpicked to tell the government what they already know they're going to do, that you were not allowed to take in your phone, you weren't able to have a laptop, everything was old school. So in a conversation that is about the productivity of Australia a quarter of the way into the 21st century, we were pretending it was 1975, not 2025. More to what the Financial Review wrote about the very settings that all of these great, wonderful minds weren't really trusted. When the nation's power brokers filled the Treasurer's Economic Reform Roundtable this morning, they left behind sunlight and handed over their phones, as everyone must when they enter the Cabinet room in Parliament House. No computers were allowed inside. Binders and manila folders abounded, stuffed with printouts of modelling, submissions and briefing notes. Anyone who wants to refer to material over the next 3 days has to lug in a hard copy, giving the long table look of an analogue era strategy session. Now, if the argument about the mobile phone thing is because of the secrecy inside the room, well, does anyone honestly think that representatives of Australian business are the Chinese spies In fact, remember, it's the Prime Minister of Australia who has been referred to as the handsome boy. It is the Prime Minister of Australia who receives praise from China while silence from the United States or criticism from Israel. So it can't be that reason. Is it because it is an insight into how this government does business? Put simply, if you qualified to get anywhere near the room, then it's an opportunity to kiss the ring. But more importantly than that, this government is terrible when it comes to transparency. You see, they just want to announce what the decision is at the end. They do not want anyone to know what the ideas are that they are discussing. Now, imagine that in government you're generally offered 3 options. The one that will actually fix the problem but will be politically terrible. The one that sort of touches the problem but doesn't really change anything. Or the thing that just requires more inquiries and we're looking at the problem but we're not actually doing anything about it. Government always ends up choosing probably that one, sometimes that one, depending on how much money there is or isn't in the bank. But because the federal budget, of course, as I've told you, $1 trillion debt, structural deficits for the next 40 years, which will mean trillions of dollars debt, we're dealing with the third one, where all of the empty words, the empty calories, the Queen lyrics, and I love Queen, are just being thrown around a room that's already decided these things. Now, compare this with an actual meeting of life and death issues. The conversation involving multiple world leaders, the presidents of the United States and Zelensky. Now, they weren't all sitting there banging away on their phones, but they also were sitting there thumbing through a whole bunch of manila folders. If that is the way a meeting can be done to try to decide whether a war that could go from a very significant regional conflict to being shut down or being escalated into the beginnings of World War III, I think you might be able to trust the person from the Business Council with a laptop to be able to have a look at the same graph as everyone else. Interestingly, there was another roundtable that took place just before this economic roundtable, and it was done by our friend and colleague, Joe Hildebrand, for the Daily Telegraph. He decided to sit down with half a dozen people who are actually at the coalface of Australian business. These are the people who are hiring people. These are the people who are paying rent. These are the people who are keeping our economy alive. And what did they say to Joe? Well, they didn't need a mobile. They didn't even need a note because they had life experience, something most of the people in that room today, especially the Prime Minister, whose exposure to private industry was working as a bank teller in the 1980s, or the bloke whose doctorate is in the spin of Paul Keating.
The biggest cost that we have to outlay is staff wages and also rent. Those two keep going up, while our service cost still remains the same.
The new laws that they're talking about now with the merchant fees, you know, our margins are very, very slim, and if we have to wear the merchant fees, well, we can't do it.
Even before you put the nail bag on and start working, there's so many duplications or triplicates of government departments from local government who then you go out to private certifiers, so you've got more certificates, more paperwork they require. The NCC or the National Construction Code, you know, a build time now can take 12, 18 months, 2 years.
Just to build one house, to build a home.
Yes, that's right.
Just to get the DA approved, you know, you end up paying $150,000 cost.
Wow.
Just for the paperwork. Then after that, you fit out maybe $500,000. There's a lot of bureaucracy.
The Medicare billing has not really changed over the last decade, so the rebate is not really that different, which means that as the cost of rent and everything else has gone up, we don't have enough of a profit to pay for those sorts of things.
Notice the difference between the language of those people and the empty words that I showed you before. Talk about people who are on the coalface, who can explain what the issue is, what they need fixed. Instead, the smarter people, the better people, the front end of the plane, well, they talk in all of these wild generalities, but remember, this thing's fixed. Most of the room already agrees with the government. Most of the room will help the government achieve what the government wants to achieve. What you got to see there was actual people with actual problems offering actual solutions, as opposed to the Canberra bubble effect. And we know, of course, which one the media is going to pay all of its attention to. Will they do the same work that Joe and the Telegraph did? No. Oh, no, because it's just an opportunity for us to look like, here we are, we're Hawke and Keating. But unlike Hawke and Keating, we get along. He pats the dog. There's no Kirribilli agreement between these guys. No, it's elbow rules forever and Chalmers will just sit there and take it. Well, at least for the first 25 terms that they'll be in office. But interestingly, there is a bit of opinion polling, which is worth showing you, which is that whatever does actually come out of all of this, that Australians know things are broken and they want something fixed. In fact, if you have a look here at all of the options, just pay attention to the colour, don't worry about everything else, where, put simply, the dark blue is you should wait to the next election if there's a big idea, the yellow is just get on with it, and the grey is I've got something else to do. 51% of people say the government should act on big ideas now. Don't wait over the next 3 years. About half of all Labor voters, almost half of coalition voters, and other voters, being everything from the Teals to One Nation, they too want action. So while the empty calories is one thing, you do have people who have concrete solutions for what should be happening in our country. They're talking to Joe, they're on the Telegraph, and they'll be on the television tomorrow because Ross Greenwood is going to be hosting the real Productivity Roundtable. Now, you can watch the real Productivity Roundtable tomorrow at 10 to 10 on Sky News Extra. There'll be highlights on the main channel, but please, Sky News Extra. That is available to all of the customers, be they Flash, Foxtel, or become a member of Sky News for just $5. You'll be able to see this, and believe me, it'll be great viewing. It's the alternative to the other Talk Fest. Among the people that will be in the room, former Productivity Commissioner Gary Banks, Senator Matt Canavan, who had a great interview with Andrew Bolt a couple of hours ago, and many other key economic figures. You can also stream it at what should already be your homepage, skynews.com.au. They flap their gums, we offer solutions. It's why you watch us each and every night and why I thank you forever. In Australia, we know the difference between legal and illegal immigration. But also we know that there has been a ridiculous surge in the population of Australia in the past 30 years. I mentioned this last night, and wow, this set off a whole bunch of emails asking me to show it again. 1995, 30 years ago, 18 million people lived in Australia. 30 years later, 2025, 27.5 million people live in Australia. And because Treasury only wants more people to be added, and everyone in that room wants more immigration, by 2065, we'll keep going to 43.6 million people. Where will they live? Shh, don't talk about it. Who will pay for the infrastructure? Shh, it'll all work itself out. But something that has been a long problem for Australia, but something that has been absolutely clear, that if you are a legal migrant to the country, or like me, you were lucky enough to be born here, no special skill to be born here, but those that have, of course, filled out all the paperwork, waited their turn, they know the difference between legal and illegal immigration. Australian politics has been settled on this matter, that illegal immigration cannot and will not be tolerated in Australia. Now, this government has found ways to try to find a way around the system. The three-prong approach of Operation Sovereign Borders, which included temporary protection visas, meaning the 50,000 people here who got here illegally under the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd years, well, they, of course, if they are still in the country, have now magically become Australian citizens. Despite the fact that, of course, many courts many times has turned around and said that they are not genuine refugees, but they just wanted to pick up teal and green preferences, so we looked the other way, or at least the government is looking the other way. But there are still a cadre of people who are being held in immigration detention centres because they are not refugees. They have been ruled not to be refugees. On multiple appeals, they have been ruled not to be asylum seekers. Some people are at the start of that process, many are through the end of that process, and sadly it's a process where you can keep appealing no matter how illogical the appeal is. Now, these facilities, of course, cost an awful lot of money, take an awful lot of time, and in my view, when anyone attacks those facilities, from breaking a window to what's happened recently in Melbourne, which is to have a riot in them, then the next day, after the fire's been put out, put them on a plane and send them anywhere else but Australia. I do not care from what country they come from. I do not care how decent or otherwise their case is to be considered a refugee. I'm not saying everyone in immigration detention, but I'm saying any and everyone involved in a riot in an immigration detention centre, automatically, no, bugger off, see you later. This is what happened in an immigration centre in Melbourne.
Yes, people, look, this is for all the people that have been separated from their children, their grandchildren, Yeah, this is for you. That were in detention, that have been deported, that have suicided, that have passed on. Well, this is for you.
I don't care, pal. You're stupid enough to film it. They should know who you are. Goodbye, ta-ta. What did he say? This is for all the people who have been deported. You mean the people who did not qualify to enter the country, the ones who came here through the side door. Now, there are millions of people in refugee camps, and Australia takes tens of thousands of legitimate refugees each and every year. We are not cold-hearted. In fact, we are more generous than most countries, if not all countries, around the world. But Australia is also a place where people wait their turn, fill out their forms, qualify for citizenship, and they are the ones who we welcome into the country. The people who burn the facilities that the taxpayer has paid for, I'm sorry, I don't want them anywhere near this joint. Or is that just me being hard-hearted? You would have thought we would have heard today from the Home Affairs Minister, Tony Burke, because he, along with the Immigration Minister, has the responsibility for our immigration detention centres. Where is the hard-hearted speak about social cohesion, etc., etc.? You burn Australian property, bugger off. Of course, nothing was said about this today. Instead, we know the main fight that he believes is that the person who shouldn't be coming into Australia is an elected member of the Israeli parliament. Now, yeah, he is well and truly controversial. He may be too hot to handle for most. But if you believe in free speech, you believe if somebody is an elected member of parliament, then maybe the benefit of the doubt needs to be given. But we know that's their focus. And tonight, the Israeli Prime Minister has fired up about it. We will discuss it in moments away from now. But do you agree with me that anyone who's involved in the riot in an immigration detention centre, you go and find their paperwork and you throw it at the fire and then you pick them up and you put them on the next plane and tell them to leave? Often shows like this talk about the madness that can sometimes come out of the judiciary, the learned men and women of the bench who don't deal in a justice system, they deal in a legal system, where no matter how guilty somebody is, if they had a poor background, if they've got an excuse for this, an excuse for that, generally speaking, the punishment part is not as hardcore as the victim of their crime would want. Exception to the rule. And get ready for the left to come after this guy very hard. He's the Chief Justice of the Northern Territory. His name is Michael Grant. And he was recently speaking to a collection of lawyers in the Northern Territory. Now, he, among other things, has spoken of how horrific crimes that take place in Indigenous communities towards the women of those Indigenous communities is often being covered up by the perpetrator of it, pretending that there's some sort of traditional justification for the behaviour that they have been involved in. Let me read from the article with you. The Chief Justice of the Northern Territory says some extreme attacks on Aboriginal women have been attributed to BS, is what he said, traditional violence, in which perpetrators seek to justify their crimes as the enforcement of their rights. And he warns the domestic violence is worsening in the top end. Now, again, they won't go after the people perpetrating the violence. They will go after the person who has spent years of his life dealing with the consequences, trying to punish the people for what they have done to the innocent women in those communities. Now, we have talked uphill and down dale about this. We have done shows from the Northern Territory. Matt Cunningham is the best in the business in journalism in the Northern Territory on this issue. We have spoken for years with Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, from when she was a councillor to a senator and now, of course, a front bencher in the alternative government. Here are some of the comments that he made. Now, I have to warn you, the video quality of this is not very good because it comes off a stream. The audio quality is easy and you will be able to understand what he has to say. This is about the types of violence that he sees the courts having to deal with in the Northern Territory way too often.
As one Indigenous commentator observed, there are now three kinds of violence in Aboriginal communities: alcoholic violence, violence in accordance with traditional law, and traditional violence. What that last category is intended to describe is the sort of assault that's perpetrated usually, if not exclusively, by drunken men for illegitimate reasons, which is then sought to be justified as the exercise or enforcement of some sort of traditional right.
Thank goodness you have a person on the bench who obviously sees those three distinctions and sees the third of those as being a disgrace because it is being used as an excuse for the abuse of women, Indigenous women. And the facts in and around the assault rates in those communities in the Northern Territory is a disgrace. I'll get to that in a second. But again, part of what he had to say. The Chief Justice says that alcohol was a significant risk factor in cases in which Aboriginal women had been attacked by her partner. Statistics demonstrate 90% of attacks on Aboriginal women were alcohol-related, a bit more on those shocking statistics that are a national disgrace, and a disgrace that anyone would walk into a courtroom trying to find some sort of customary or traditional reason why they shouldn't be punished for it.
93% of the victims of intimate partner homicide in the last 25 years in the Northern Territory have been Aboriginal women. The rate of intimate partner homicide in the Northern Territory is 7 times the national average. Aboriginal women in the Northern Territory are 40 times more likely to be hospitalised as a result of intimate partner violence than other members of the community.
What a disgrace. What an absolute disgrace. Firstly, that those crimes are taking place. Secondly, the types of excuses that are being offered to justify them. Indigenous women deserve the same protections as all other women in the country. Full stop. But because that conversation is too difficult for some to have, I guarantee by this time, tomorrow night, the heat will not be on the perpetrators, but be on the Chief Justice of the Northern Territory for telling the truth. Now, as you know, we have been following the 10-week drama that is Tasmanian politics. I'm fascinated by it. So much drama, so much drama. Well, the drama came to an end today and the Libs won. Big. Dean Winter went from having 10 seats in the last parliament to having 10 seats in this parliament, but went from the Labor Party having more than a quarter of the vote to now having less than a quarter of the vote, having the lowest rate in 100 years. Yet this bloke decided, I'm going to do what I did that led to the election, which is to move a no confidence motion in a government that got almost half of the votes in Tasmania. He did it again today, hoping that the Greens and everyone who was in the Libs would join with him and give him the 18 votes to become the Premier no one wanted.
Honourable Speaker, this day it might not end well for me, but this day will define this Premier for the rest of his political career. He will have the stigma of being a sellout, of giving in to Green demands on racing, salmon and forestry, selling out people who backed him for 20 years. No one can ever trust you again.
So I presume the Labor Party's policy is to now save the greyhound industry? We'll all find out together. It was a brave position that the New South Wales Labor Party took that in part was able to save that greyhound industry in New South Wales. Is that now the avowed position of the Labor Party? If so, let's see where we go for the next couple of years, because remember, the phase out of that industry doesn't happen immediately. It will in fact happen between now and very close to the next election. But those ideas about the salmon industry, the forestry industry, Dean Winter is trying to say, I'm not going to sell anyone out, but you still need to vote for me because I'm not him. He thinks this is the beginning of a winning strategy if he is the opposition leader at the next election. But of course, if he even loses at the next election, he will get the same treatment that the former multiple-time loser in Tasmania, Rebecca White, got, which was she was rewarded with a spot in the federal parliament. Interestingly, when the vote took place, Jeremy Rockcliffe sort of knew what was happening. The Greens weren't going to vote for it. Many of the independents weren't going to vote for it. So in actual fact, he ended up the man who fought them all and won. Congratulations to an absolute, and I mean this as a compliment, a beast of a political operator, one who found a way to win again and again and again. And he's doing it for the majority of people in Tasmania.
The Leader of the Opposition wants the Greens and others on the crossbench to support him to become Premier. But clearly he believes he can do so without listening to their concerns, their priorities and their issues. we cannot ignore the fact that in minority government we must come together and agree on policy positions that reflect the wider will of the Tasmanian community.
So the Labor Party will look at it as sellout. Many of the industries that have been screwed over will also view it as sellout, no question about it. But if you've handed a parliament where you don't end up with a majority, at some point you have to compromise. What you compromise on and how often you compromise, we'll see. And just because they won today doesn't mean they will win again in 6 months or 12 months or 2 years. But what was amazing was the Greens, who the Greens actually turned around and did not do what they always do, which is to march in step with the Labor Party. This is the Greens in Tasmania saying no to an opportunity to kill the Libs.
Jeremy Rockcliffe obviously understands the minority parliament dynamics that he's working in, and Dean Winter does not. And so it is with great disappointment and frustration that the Greens have come to a united decision that we do not have confidence in Dean Winter's Labor being the next government for Tasmania.
Now, I thought everyone was going to sit it out and it would end up in this scenario where 14 is going to beat 10, 14 Libs versus 10 Labor. No. It ended up that 25 of the 35 members of Parliament voted against the motion and therefore in endorsement of the government. The photos that come via the Mercury newspaper here of the proceedings, how sad and sorry does Labor look? Now, they think that this is the beginning of a winning strategy. Well, I'm sorry, you've just had an election with your lowest vote ever, and then you just tried to pull on exactly the reason why there was an election in the first place. Compare that to all the Libs, all the independents, all getting together. In fact, the most left-leaning of those independents is a former ABC employee, what a surprise, who ran as the Teal. Very sanctimonious bloke, but still. Labor set out undermining the very notion of collaboration and compromise as it sought to lead a minority government. In my years reporting politics, never have I come across an opposition less ready for government. Unbelievable. That's Peter George, the Teal. Again, he will most likely, I would think, be one of the first to jump and say he wants to change the government because that's the way the wind will blow. But incredible. Jeremy Rockcliffe and the Libs, well done, holding strong. Congratulations. That remain the government, incredibly, in Tasmania. Hopefully we'll have a chat when we get down there in a few days' time for our town, which is going to be, of course, in Hobart.